June 8, 1972, South Vietnam. Associated Press photographer Nick Utt takes a picture that will go down in history. On the road, children, they are running, they are screaming. In the center of the frame is a young girl, the skin on her body burned. Her name is Kim Phuc. She is 9 years old. Behind her, fire, napalm. This image will later spread across the entire world and become one of the most powerful symbols of war. But at the moment it is taken, it is simply one more episode, one more village, one more airstrike. This is what the war officially called the containment of communism looked like. A war that was supposed to prove the strength of a superpower, but instead showed its limits. Vietnam in general had a difficult fate. The country had to fight for its independence for almost 20 years, even after the Second World War had already ended. First, it was a war with France, because France wanted to keep Vietnam as a colony. And later, a war with the United States, which first supported France with weapons, and then, after France lost, entered the war itself. After France's defeat, the international community tries to freeze the conflict, and for this purpose, in 1954, the Geneva Accords are signed in Geneva. Vietnam is temporarily divided into two parts along the 17th parallel. The north, under the control of Ho Chi Minh, the leader of a national movement that emerged from the people. The south, under the control of an anti-communist government. But the key word here is temporary. The plan was simple. In 2 years, hold general elections and reunify the country. But all participants understood that if elections were actually held, Ho Chi Minh would almost certainly win. And that would mean that all of Vietnam would become communist. The United States did not agree with this scenario. The reason was the domino theory. By this point, China had already become communist. The Soviet Union was expanding its influence. The United States believed that if one more country became communist, the other countries of the region would follow. If Vietnam was not stopped now, Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand would follow. Essentially, all of Southeast Asia could become communist. That is why the United States brings Ngo Dinh Diem to power in South Vietnam and begins supporting him. But the problem was that his authority was not perceived as legitimate from the very beginning. He was not elected. A referendum was staged for his appointment. He did not unite the country. He relied on outside support. He was corrupt, and the people did not support him. It is under these conditions that something begins to form in the South that will later become the key factor of the entire war: the Vietcong. This is not a regular army. It is a guerrilla network. The Vietcong are people who live among the population, people who do not constantly wear uniforms, people who know the terrain, know the people, know where to hide and where to strike. They are supported by the North, but their real strength lies in their knowledge of the country and the support of the population. This changes the very nature of the war. It is no longer a conflict between armies standing opposite one another. It becomes a war in which it is impossible to draw a clear front line. Tensions continue to rise, and by 1965, the United States begins a full-scale troop deployment. First, tens of thousands of soldiers, then hundreds of thousands. At the peak of the war, more than 500,000 American soldiers will be stationed in Vietnam at the same time. The U.S. strategy is built around force. Operation Rolling Thunder begins, one of the longest bombing campaigns in history. From 1965 to 1968, the United States systematically bombs North Vietnam, trying to break its will to resist. But the problem is that this war is not fought according to the rules the American Army is accustomed to. Vietnam is not an open field. It is jungle, where technology loses its advantage. It is narrow trails, where military columns are vulnerable. It is villages where it is impossible to distinguish a civilian from a fighter. According to official data, the United States dropped more than 7 million tons of bombs on Vietnam, as well as neighboring Laos and Cambodia, several times more than was dropped during the entire Second World War in Europe. But even that scale does not produce results. When the bombings fail to achieve the expected effect, the United States moves to another strategy. Operation Ranch Hand begins. Its goal is to deprive the enemy of cover and food supplies. At that time, no international ban on chemical weapons existed, and the United States decides to use them. Chemicals are sprayed from the air, the most famous of which is Agent Orange, a herbicide containing dioxin, one of the most toxic chemical compounds known. Using Agent Orange, forests are literally burned away, fields are destroyed. Entire regions become uninhabitable. During the war, around 76 million liters of chemicals are sprayed over Vietnam. The consequences of these chemical attacks go far beyond military objectives. According to various estimates, around 20% of the forests of South Vietnam were destroyed this way. The chemicals enter the soil, the water, and human bodies. This leads to mass illnesses, cancer, and birth defects in children, consequences that are still felt today.
Today we're in rural Vietnam, where Agent Orange was used by US forces to clear vegetation in an attempt to expose guerrillas during the Vietnam War. Now, during this time, millions of gallons of this toxic defoliant was sprayed over central Vietnam, killing and maiming many thousands of local farmers, villagers, and their children.
This is no longer just a military operation. It is a long-term transformation of the environment in which the country lives. In addition to chemical attacks, on March 16, 1968, events take place in the village of My Lai that will later become one of the defining moments of the war and deeply influence how the war is perceived both internationally and within American society. American units enter an area marked on maps as a Vietcong activity zone. Command expects combat, prepares for battle, and plans to locate a guerrilla headquarters. But on the ground, there are no fortified positions and no organized resistance. Instead, an ordinary village. What happens next does not fit the logic of a military operation. Over the course of several hours, American soldiers kill between 350 and 500 civilians. Men, women, children, the elderly, everyone. People are gathered into groups and shot in what is effectively a mass execution. There are testimonies of violence, abuse, and houses being burned. The commander of one of the platoons responsible for the largest number of killings, Lieutenant William Laws Calley Jr., will later face official charges. And within this episode, there is a moment that breaks the normal logic of military discipline and subordination. American helicopter pilot Major Hugh Thompson Jr., seeing what is happening on the ground, lands his helicopter directly between the soldiers and the shelter where civilians are hiding and orders his door gunner to aim the helicopter's heavy weapon at his fellow American troops, demanding that they stop the killings or he will open fire. And it helps. After the pilot returns to the United States, information about My Lai becomes public. It causes shock, and Hugh Thompson himself demands an investigation. Such brutality can no longer be explained by either strategy or mistake. This begins to destroy all moral justifications for the war inside America itself. The Army of South Vietnam, supported by the United States, is also going through severe challenges at this time. In 1968, the Tet Offensive begins, a massive coordinated attack by North Vietnamese and Vietcong forces across the territory of South Vietnam. It becomes an unpleasant surprise. After several years of war, the enemy is still capable of attacking the largest cities, including Saigon. This destroys the central narrative of the war, that the situation is under control and victory is only a matter of time. In addition to the Tet Offensive, another iconic incident occurs that shapes a new perception of the war within American society. It is the execution scene in Saigon. A South Vietnamese police officer shoots an unarmed prisoner in the head directly on the street.
On February 1st, 1968, an NBC cameraman is filming South Vietnam's chief of national police in Saigon when a Vietcong prisoner is brought to him. The ensuing image becomes a symbol of the war's brutality.
The moment is captured by Associated Press photographer Eddie Adams.
When I took it, like when he raised the gun to shoot him in the head, I didn't know he was going to do that. I thought he was going to threaten him with his pistol.
It becomes one of the most famous photographs of the entire war and spreads widely throughout the global press. The context of the scene is complex, but by this point it is already impossible to stop the growing wave of outrage over violence and brutality. It is at this moment that a massive anti-war movement begins in the United States. Protests take place at universities, in the streets, and in major cities. Students, veterans, cultural figures, and intellectuals join the movement. The war continues, but by the early 1970s, it becomes obvious that the war cannot be won in the classical sense. There will be no capitulation. The administration of Richard Nixon, who has just been elected, realizes that the situation is a dead end and decides to shift the burden of the war onto the South Vietnamese army while gradually withdrawing American troops. Only in 1973 do the United States officially withdraw their forces. And already in April 1975, the inevitable happens: the fall of Saigon. The city is practically undefended. North Vietnam captures it. A chaotic evacuation begins for those who supported the United States and the South Vietnamese government during the war. Helicopters carry people away from rooftops while thousands attempt to flee the country by sea. Later, we will see an almost identical scene during the withdrawal of American troops from Afghanistan. But that is an entirely different story, one we will definitely tell another time. When the war finally ends, Vietnam succeeds in defending its independence and right to self-determination. Only one question remains: at what cost? According to various estimates, around 3 to 4 million Vietnamese died. 58,000 American soldiers were killed, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers were wounded. Millions of people became refugees. The United States dropped millions of tons of ammunition and used chemical substances that changed the region's ecology for decades. For Vietnam, the war lasted nearly 20 years through U.S. allies, and for 8 of those years, from 1965 to 1973, directly against the United States itself. In today's money, the United States spent more than $1 trillion on the Vietnam War, but gained nothing except exhaustion and disappointment. From a military standpoint, it was a defeat for the United States. America entered Vietnam convinced that it could stop communist ideology, but instead, it encountered something else entirely. It is impossible to change a country without understanding it. And perhaps the main conclusion is that power, even the greatest power, does not provide control over the consequences.